Here we go again.
Day 456.
Dug deep into the cellar today.
We're actually trying some really fun wines today.
Yeah, I think we are.
Well,
Welcome to everybody joining us via Instagram, joining by Zoom invitation. Welcome to another edition of Day Drinking.
as we say, welcome, listener.
So I'm Rory Williams, owner and winemaker of Frogs Lake Winery.
And I'm John Williams, owner and winemaker of Frogs Lake. Actual owner.
But not actual winemaker.
Yeah. And bringing you today, wishing everyone a happy Easter. You may not remember this, but you were actually born on Easter.
I have very few recollections of my own birth.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, but there was April 22nd, which is pretty late. The latest Easter can be is April 25th.
You're just handing out my birthday like that?
Yeah,
my social security number is...
Well, I thought someone might want to wish you happy birthday.
Yeah, somebody from the IRS.
Get your draft notice finally.
Yeah, exactly.
Does everyone know actually how they determine when Easter is going to be every year? Do you know?
Nope.
All right, so here's the rule. It is the first Sunday after the full moon after the vernal equinox. So you have to have, so the earliest it can be is if the full moon is on March 21st, it could be on March 22nd. That's the earliest it can possibly be on a Sunday. And the latest it could be is April 25th. Isn't that cool? Could you pour me some time?
Yeah, that's really cool. You know, it's really cool. I feel like we should have cut to one of those screens that says "The more you know" after the public service announcements. So happy Easter, everybody! Happy Pesach to everybody as well.
Yeah.
And start off. We're drinking some fun wines today, so we're going to start off. Everybody pour themselves a glass. If you're actually not already half a bottle in, then we're severely disappointed. But we are going to start off with the 2017 Chenin Blanc.
We talked about Zinfandel being a relatively rare endangered species. Talk about Chenin Blanc, you know, it's remarkable. There's almost no Chenin Blanc left in Napa Valley anymore.
That's very true. There's only about 8 acres of Chenin Blanc left. Before we go any further, our production team is going to kill me unless I mention the fact that you can find out about this in this session, past sessions, any future sessions on interactive.frogslake.com, and we very much encourage everybody to participate in the Q&A. Ask questions in the Q&A portion of the Zoom, and that'll show up on the screen, handy dandy screen next to me, and we'll try and take some time to answer questions. And we hope everybody has the wines in front of them. But yeah, Chenin Blanc, you know, it's kind of interesting, Dad. I think you have some statistics on this.
I am the Department of Statistics.
The Department of Statistics today.
They are all scratched out. Without my glasses, I can't read them.
Oh, okay, well, that's good. They're very
easy. But
useful.
when I got off the bus in 1975 in Vallejo in the spring, there was more Chenin Blanc and more Riesling planted in the Napa Valley than there was Chardonnay. How incredible is that, right?
It's pretty crazy.
And now down to 8 acres.
There were hundreds of acres of Chenin Blanc. It really, even up into the early 90s in Napa, it was the third most planted white variety in the entire county. And it was just one of the statistics showing the diversity of grapes that we had in Napa County.
We're going to talk about a lot about that today, you know. But you know, I feel like Chenin Blanc is kind of the Rodney Dangerfield of white wine varieties. It just doesn't get enough respect, and I never understand it. Every time I have a great Chenin from Vouvray or the Savennière or something like that, I just go, "Oh my God, this is the greatest variety ever!"
Yeah.
And it just doesn't get a lot of respect.
It's interesting because you know, this is actually fun to come back to after a few. This has been in the bottle now for a couple of years, and it's really starting to take on some of this really powerful kind of aromatic character. But that Chenin Blanc I primarily identify as this texture-driven white, and this is the prompting to us to get to actually drink this one.
As if we need prompting to drink.
Well, yeah, apparently I need to be told. Chenin Blanc.
I see what you mean, though, that almost a little bit of an oily sort of character to the texture. I always thought of it as an aromatic variety, but...
Often the descriptor that often pops into my mind with Chenin Blanc is that kind of beeswaxy kind of character. So that's a texture and a little bit of an aroma deal.
So I mean, the home of Chenin Blanc is of course the Loire Valley in France. This is where it's cultured, where it comes from, where it's spread from all over the world, and where it's celebrated to this day. I mean, still people just love their beautiful Vouvrays, and but it's made in a variety of styles, everything from a crisp white wine all the way up to sparkling Vouvrays.
Sweet, semi-sweet, dry styles. So it's an incredibly flexible grape, and I think that it just, you know, we're sort of at a loss to explain the decline of Chenin Blanc in Napa, and it's really kind of unfair to the grape.
It's really more the gain of Chardonnay, though, right? I mean, look, we're going to talk a little bit about this today. You know, Baskins and Robbins has 36 flavors, but usually people go in and I always get the same one every time.
It's 31 flavors. We talked about this before, and it's 31 flavors, not 36.
Well, they're just capped out.
They can't possibly do anything.
Well, anyway, the point of it is that this is the joy of wine, are all these flavors, and you might never try, but it's nice to know pistachio's there. Yeah. And that's why I hope Chenin Blanc doesn't go away.
It's been interesting the last few years. You know, should sort of explain how we came to Chenin Blanc. So this is.
Frank would like to know.
I think there are a number of people in the business who are still trying to figure out why we're dealing with Chenin Blanc. So why are we dealing with Chenin Blanc? This was the genesis of the Chenin Blanc for Frog Sleep. What really traces back to a little tiny corner of our Gallerin vineyard, which is as some of you may know, it's the primary source of our Sauvignon Blanc at Frog Sleep. That's the majority, the plurality of our grapes for our Sauvignon Blanc program come from the Gallerin vineyard. But Gallerin's a 40-acre vineyard, and it's not entirely planted to Sauvignon Blanc. Those of you who are big fans of our Petite Syrah back in the day, a lot of those grapes came from, and those grapes still go into our Zinfandel, but the kind of single variety Petite Syrahs we make were largely from Gallerin, from a little gravel bar that was there. And we were always aware of the existence at the tip of what we call blocks 1 and 2. There's a little kind of wedge at the end of at the very corner of those blocks that has a lot of clay in it, and it's a little bit different than the rest of the vineyard, which is largely these kind of gravelly river soils. This is planted right up against the Napa River, and it was always intriguing to us. We had planted a little bit of Merlot there back when we first acquired the property.
Yeah, that was the first go was Merlot, and it made a great wine 1 year out of 3.
1 year out of 3, and it was absolutely maddening the other 2 years out of 3.
Yeah,
and it stayed in the ground for many years because it was so good. That 1 year out of 3, it was so variable though. When we made the decision to switch out of the Merlot, you know, we had some options in front of us as plant more Sauvignon Blanc, which we did a little bit of that Merlot went into Sauvignon Blanc, but we got to drinking and then we got to thinking, which is usually unfortunately the path that we take here at Frog Sleep. All of our thinking comes after that. Maybe we should try it before we start drinking sometime.
Yeah, but you know, I certainly a glass of wine was involved, but I mean, exploring this idea of the older varieties that were in Napa and understanding why they were planted, what people were thinking is really very exciting. It's the greatest thing about being a winemaker really is this constant, it's like Christmas every harvest when we get to make new wines. I've had the privilege of making wines from varieties no one had ever made a wine from before. I mean, back in New York State.
What was the first weird variety you ever worked with?
Well, not weird, but it was the pride and joy of Cornell University. It was a hybrid variety called Cayuga, and we got the first cuttings of it when I was working at Glenora Wine Cellars, and I made the first commercial Cayuga in the history of mankind.
And to our great disappointment, not the last Cayuga in the history of mankind.
Almost the last.
Almost the last. We almost ruined it for everybody.
It was delicious.
It was delicious. I'm sure it was delicious. So we kind of got to thinking that, hey, it'd be fun to work with a different variety, and we didn't necessarily know what we wanted to work with at first, but we had been exploring for a couple years at that point, and we'll get into that when we talk about the heritage. We got down the path of thinking about these heritage varieties and these varieties that have been planted in Napa and really all over California for many, many decades, but had, for one reason or another, almost, if not actually, had almost disappeared. And Chenin Blanc was one of those varieties that we had kind of seen, it had appeared in a flash of Frog's Leap history with the leapfrog mulch, but it was, it had been a small component of that, but it quickly kind of
Can I
faded
go to the
away.
Bureau of Statistics here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Read this for me. This is going to be a question for you, okay? So we date the modern history of the Napa Valley to 1966. Is that fair enough? When Robert Mondavi built the first new winery in the Napa Valley after Prohibition, it was really the start of, well, there were 10 white grape varieties planted in 1966 in greater abundance than Chardonnay. How many of them do you think you can? I'll give you a hint. Chenin Blanc is one of them.
Chenin Blanc is one of them. Repeat the question here.
And what 10 white varieties were more planted than Chardonnay in 1966?
We need to take a pause here for a sec. Okay. You having audio issues? Okay. Should we take a quick pause on our end, or?
Let's stay live and make some adjustments.
Okay.
All
Sounds
right.
good. We want. To our great surprise, you guys actually want to hear us talk. So we're gonna work out these audio issues. In the meantime, we'll drink some wine as well.
So can I tell a joke since they can't hear?
No,
us?
you may not tell any jokes. We've been over this. No more jokes.
All right. Well,
So let's see. Name 10 white varieties more than Chardonnay.
there were more planted in Chardonnay in 1966, the advent of the modern.
Green. What about Green Hungarian?
Green Hungarian is one of
That's
them.
my favorite one. That's my favorite one.
Chenin Blanc, Sauvignon Blanc, Burger, Colombard, Chasselas, Riesling, Semillon, Sauvignon Vert, and Green Hungarian.
Wow.
Yeah.
So-
So look at the diversity of white grapes that were planted here, and it was kind of like throw it at the wall and see what fits. And I guess Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc are what
The ones that came out of the mix.
Yeah.
But we got to thinking about what we would want to work with, and Chenin Blanc felt like the right variety for us to kind of move forward on. We were intrigued by, we'd always loved, I remember Dad going to Kermit Lynch with you when we were kids. He dragged us into wine shops when we were kids. And we would go down there and we'd pick up all of these Sommers and Bouvrets from Kermit Lynch, and it was just, that was kind of the winter, the winter white almost in a way that we would drink with our meals growing up.
Well,
there was this desire, this knowledge that it had become this increasingly rare variety in Napa, and it was especially shocking to me that there was only 8-9 acres at that point in time. I mean, it was pretty dire. And it was disappointing. Nobody was planting Chenin Blanc.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because the main attribute of Chenin Blanc and why it is planted broadly in other places is that it's a high acid variety, and you would think in our warmer climate here that would be a natural, and it is, quite frankly. And the acidity balance on this wine, I think, is superb, and it is because of that high acid that comes with Chenin Blanc, often painfully so in its native lands. But I think I think there's actually more Chenin Blanc planted in South Africa now than anywhere.
Yeah.
I tell you, Jeff brought a bottle by the other night, and it was unbelievable.
Fabulous wines down there, and I think it's indicative that it's a grape that shouldn't be forgotten, and it's actually really fun there. I just did a tasting with a bunch of producers in and around Napa who work with Chenin Blanc, and we sat around a table and drank each other's Chenin Blancs, and oh my God, the quality that's out there, and it's really this kind of renaissance that's being led, not with grapes necessarily from Napa, but from around other parts of the state where it was planted fairly widely, and people are starting to rediscover the fact that this is a grape that matters, that has something to say. And we only make a small portion of it. We're not ultra focused on Chenin Blanc, but for us, I think, Dad, for me, I love Chenin Blanc is one of the early grapes that we pick at Frog's Leap. It's sometimes even in the first week of harvest is when it comes in. But it has this ability to keep that acid, but also reflect the sunshine a little bit and reflect the richness of California here.
Well, remember, I tried to make my Batra-sized Chenin the other couple years ago. I got to taste that, by the way. I bet it's getting pretty good right now.
Probably pretty good. But it is we hope that you guys love this wine because it's it's a very small percentage of what we do at Frogsley, but it's widely. But for us, it's fun, and I think that it's we'll get into this a little bit more with the heritage. I think it has something important to say about what it means to make wine in Napa and what it means to make wine in California. It's important to keep these older varieties, the diversity of varieties out there.
And I know it can be frustrating because these are not wines that are available out in the general marketplace. So you're not going to go to your corner wine store or your local restaurant and find these wines. It's just because there's so little of them. But for those of you in the fellowship, obviously this is part of the reason you belong, is to be able to have access to these wines. And of course, once we're back up and can have you visit, these are the wines we'd like to pour and enjoy with people. And it's a shame there's not more of them, but
But they give us. They also give us a chance to kind of focus on being experimental with winemaking. This wine is fermented and aged entirely in concrete. Those of you who attended the session on Sauvignon Blanc will recognize that's how we ferment and age the Rachel Rossi Reserve Sauvignon Blanc as well. And that was those co-evolved in a way where we were excited about the potential for concrete. We don't have enough concrete to do all of the Sauvignon Blanc that way, or all of the Chardonnay that necessarily completely in concrete. But the Chenin Blanc is only a few tons that we work with. It's less than 1% of our acreage. And so we have the chance to kind of, play around with it a little bit.
So in your opinion, is Chenin Blanc a wine of terroir, or is it a wine of technique?
I think it's,
I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, the answer is yes. And like a lot of great grapes, I think that it's definitely, it doesn't necessarily impose its own varietal will upon you. It doesn't say, hey, I'm Chenin Blanc no matter what you do to me. But I think it is flexible and powerful enough to respond well to both differences in soil and differences in climate, while saying, hey, I'm going to be speaking with a different voice if I'm fermented in new oak, or fermented in concrete, or fermented in stainless steel. And we've gotten the chance to explore some of those. I remember the first year that we had the Chenin Blanc, I think it was 2015, was the first year that we actually picked any Chenin Blanc off of Galler, and we both actually took some. Frogsley took the majority, and I took a little bit to make on my own as well. And we were fermenting in different locations, and we called each other on the crush pad going, so how are you fermenting this? We realized we didn't necessarily have a fully formed plan.
It might be interesting to give a little insight to the changes we make every year, because we gather ideas as the harvest goes along and as we taste the wine, and then our team, Rory, myself, and Paula, and Pablo, and Frank, we sit down and we talk about changes that we might want to make in what we call the protocols, the standard way we would make any of these varieties. And it's one of the most exciting days of the year when we get to store up all those, because essentially we get to make, you get to make wine once a year, and so you get a whole 11 months trying to decide how you're going to tweak it the next year. It's really an exciting and wonderful day.
You get to bring all the ideas that you kind of thought of late at night, sitting in bed or sitting in the shower, like, man, we should really do this with the Zinfandel, or do this with the Chenin Blanc.
Incorporate the leaves from last year into all
sorts of
stuff.
ideas. But the Chenin Blanc, for us, has become an incredibly joyful part of what we do. It's the one of the few white wines we make, and so it's fun to express just a little corner of Rutherford terroir in a way where this is it's an unusual soil type for Rutherford. Not most of Rutherford is not this kind of clay silt soil, which is a little unusual. And that's part of why we decided to go with the Chenin in that location, was to say, hey,
I'm glad we did.
We thought Merlot would work. Merlot didn't quite work out. We know that it's totally inappropriate for Cabernet. We think it'd be okay for Sauvignon Blanc, but we kind of wanted to experiment a little bit. And I think you'll see that kind of notion of experimentation being important with all of these wines. And I think that's really starts to get at the core of why we do this in the first place, right? When we're making Cabernet, the experiments we make there's small changes that we've developed over time.
Look, Frog's Leap is we're starting our 4th decade this year, and you would think that we would have slipped into a routine, but there's so much energy and excitement and experimentation and innovation. We just can't lose that. We just can't.
Dad, if I can just say something without it being a joke for 1 second, is that I would not be a part of Frog's Leap were that not something that were real, something that didn't. I had the decision whether to come back or not, but it's without things like the Chenin Blanc, without the kind of sense of experimentation and change and dynamic nature of it. Winemaking technology is at the point where you can plug in some numbers and make a reasonably consistent product every year. But that's not
going
really
to shock you with this, okay? And this is not a joke either. If that weren't part of our reality, I don't think I would be here either. And you see this all the time as people lose their winemaking energy, and then what's the ultimate result of that? They get sold to a corporation. They're out of the family business because they've lost that excitement and that passion for making wine, and that's a seriously bad road to go down. I don't think we are in danger of that.
Yeah.
But anyway, go out and find some Chenins, go down to Kermit Lynch, go to your local wine store, look online. There's so much wine being sold online now, it's really great. And try a few Chenins and order up a little bit more Frog's Leap, because this is a great drink. It really is a lot of fun.
It really is. And there are Chenins coming from you're going to start to see them pop out more and more from California as more and more people come to fully understand just how special this grape is and where it has potential. And I think that's kind of part of the maturity of California wine, is that it's coming along and we're figuring out, hey, this is the right corner of Napa to place. It's probably not appropriate for 1,000 acres in Napa, but there's more than 8, I would think.
More than 8, they gotta be more.
They gotta be more than 8. So, places like, our friends at Lang & Reed make a great Mendocino Chenin Blanc. Chapelet up above us on Perpetual Hills is making Chenin Blanc for a long time.
We're running out pretty soon here of other producers.
Oh, no, they're not very many, not very many.
Well, very good.
Casa Muestra, I think. So enjoy the Chenin. I think it's really, for me, that kind of white fruit right now is really special.
There's only 2 times to drink red wine.
Morning and the night?
No. When you're fishing and when you're not fishing.
So
come on, we have to get to a little heritage in the glass here.
Yeah.
So
we'll move. I'm gonna keep this in my glass.
Yeah, mine's not gonna get too far away, but
number 2.
Just out of the screen there. Yeah. But heritage. This you're gonna have this was your wild ass idea, so you're gonna have to take the lead on this. But again, it's the same idea. There were so many varieties planted in Napa. Maybe not quite as the same. I mean, but there was Cabernet. It's really changed. Like I said, look now, Cabernet is when in 1966 when Robert Mondavi started, right, the modern era, Cabernet was 18% of. Sorry, I've got this mixed up. It is now Cabernet just dominates. It's like 85% of all the red grapes planted, but that wasn't always the same, right?
It wasn't always the case, and I think it's the heritage. So we'll quickly go through the mix on the back here. This is a blend of a co-fermented blend of Charbonneau, Petit Syrah, Mourvèdre, Carignan, Val d'Agay, and Mondeuse, and often we throw a little bit of Riesling in there as well, just a few pounds to spice it up. And I think obviously that kind of a blend requires a little bit of explanation. And I think ever since we started the heritage, I've been giving explanations. Well, why are we making this wine?
Look, lift this glass, roll it around a little bit.
Your first answer is in your glass.
Your first answer is in your glass. This wine had to be made. And I think it's a credit to us. I mean, 3 of the great varieties in here were more planted than Cabernet Sauvignon at one point in the history of the Napa Valley, and it's wonderful.
It is wonderful. So the idea with the heritage, and I feel like I've given this talk a few times, but it's important because it harkens back to that sense of experimentation. When we purchased the Rossi Ranch in 2007, There's the old historic water tower that's in front of, that's the iconic image of the Rossi Ranch. And
The old winery, it still exists there.
The winery that exists there, and that serves as a constant, to this day, serves as a constant reminder of the agricultural heritage of Napa Valley, and that heritage is not limited to a single grape, and that the existence of California wine and its triumph in the past and now is the sense of experimentation that's always gone on here. California, there are no regulations about what you can and can't plant in a certain area and call it one thing or the other. Instead, we've always had the complete freedom to plant whatever we want. And maybe some of that is just because we had no idea what was the right thing to plant in a certain place, but I think it speaks to something that's important about making wine in California, which is that, hey, if you want to grow Riesling in the middle of Napa Valley, you want to grow Chenin Blanc, you can do it. And it's up to you to make it taste good. And there's a certain sense of...
Talk to me about this, because look, the Napa Valley is roughly 40% the size of the Medoc, in the most famous area for Bordeaux or for Cabernet Sauvignon. So we're a smaller area, and yet it is planted almost exclusively to the Sauvignon varieties, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, little Petit Verdot, etc. Right? So why wouldn't it be right that we would dominate with Cabernet Sauvignon? In other words, they do there, and they're required to do it there.
Yeah.
Why is it different than Napa Valley? We're smaller than them, and for that matter, Burgundy is either Chardonnay or Pinot Noir, right? And we're smaller than Burgundy.
I think that it is right for them to plant in the Medoc, for that to be primarily Cabernet Sauvignon. I think that it is different in California for one really big reason, which is, why do we make wine at all? Why do we seek to make wine year after year and experiment with things, and what's the point of this? And I think it comes down to making a wine taste like the place and evoking memory, evoking a sense of home, really, in the wine. And that, we have to, when we make wine and we want it to taste like Napa Valley, we have to kind of sit down and think about what it means for a wine to taste like Napa Valley. I think it's, that draws on things that are different and unique to California, that in a way that maybe just doesn't really apply to the Medoc.
Fair enough, but I think where where I thought you would go on this is a John McPhee on me. In other words, the fact that our soils and our climate are so different, even in this small space. I mean, we have 130 different soil types in the Napa Valley. The Medoc, the plantable area of Medoc, has really got 2 soil types, and Burgundy's got 1, right? And so there is no homogeneity in the soil types here.
I think some Burgundy nuts would probably quibble with you on the single type of soil, but it is.
But they're all calcium based, right?
I think that diversity of soils, Dad, really helps to support the culture of winemaking in California, which is one of diversity and experimentation. And that California wine has never been dominated, or it's never been the sole product of California wine has never been a hegemony of a certain grape variety, or even a couple. I think you find from different corners.
Like our country, right? It's like immigrants came here from and they brought their traditions. So I mean, from where they came from, if you were German, you brought your Riesling grapes.
It's I think it gets down to what it means to make a wine that tastes like California. And I think for me at least, the heritage is an encapsulation of an effort to try to make a wine that's uniquely Californian in that way, and pays homage to some old world ideas about making wine with the kind of field blend and all of that. But I think things like Charbonneau and Petit Syrah and Mourvèdre, Mondouse, Riesling all have their own kind of unique histories in California that came to California through different people and in different ways, and that when you are putting them all together, you make something that's greater than the sum of its parts in a way. And it's that ability to make this wine and call it Napa Valley, for the one thing, and the kind of reflection of that kind of cultural terroir really of California, which has been this idea of having the diversity and having the sense of experimentation be wrapped up in the wine itself, and that is something that is exciting. Small answer if you could. I think that it's exciting to be able to.
But why didn't we just? I mean, how many varieties in here? Why didn't we make a Charbonneau and a Petit Syrah and a Mourvedre and just make them as individual varieties?
Well, they told me we'd sell even less of that.
Well, no, they did not. They did not. I think the point of it is some of the greatest red wines in the world are in fact co-fermentation. Some of my favorites, anyway. You know, and you think of some of the great wines like Châteauneuf de Pape or the wines of the Palade or south of France are often. The Rioja, they're often varieties that co-ferment and lend their strengths to each other.
Yeah.
You're distracted here. What's going on?
Trying to answer some questions here.
Oh, we've had a couple technical difficulties today, you guys, so we're doing the best we can here.
Yeah.
So it's bound to happen.
Bound to happen one of these days.
Yeah.
No, but I hope you guys are getting a sense with the heritage that this for me. Let's talk about the wine here just very briefly, which is that it's become almost a staff favorite here at the winery. There was a little bit of skepticism for a couple of years, but it's become one of those wines that there's a joy to make every year. It's a joy to kind of figure out, okay, what kind of wrinkle are we going to discover about the heritage this year, which started off as just, hey, this is kind of a fun experiment, but with a purpose of highlighting and putting a little bit of focus on these heritage varieties. And really, it's turned into the realization that, oh my God, this can make some pretty good wine.
Yeah.
This wine for us is that it's totally crushable. It's something that you can just enjoy. It's got that wrinkle of spice and a little bit of. I think the large Charbonneau component in this has a little bit of a minty character that I've always really loved. Good with your Easter lamb, by the way.
Well, the texture of this wine too. I'm not a huge texture person, but the texture of this wine is really superb and a lot of fun. And you often find that in co-fermented wines. A lot of these wines, now this particular vintage doesn't, but often we incorporate a little white grape into the fermentation as well, and that's got a whole tannic structure sort of paradigm to it called, and also color, right? Co-pigmentation of white grapes being incorporated with you. It's been a little while since I brushed up on my phenolic.
Yeah, it was interesting. I remember the first year that we crushed Riesling together, so white grape together with the red grapes, and it was the cellar crew was kind of looking at me like I was totally insane. Like, you want to crush the white grapes into the red grapes, right? You realize that's going to make them red, right? And it will make them red. And actually, there's a lesson from the old world on this, where if you've ever had a Northern Rhone Syrah, that's often co-fermented with Viognier, which is a white variety that's endemic to that area. Same thing with Chianti Classico and Trebbiano, which is another white variety that's co-fermented with Sangiovese to make Chianti Classico.
I think Chateau Simone has got is like 1/3 white grapes.
1/3 white grapes.
Yeah.
A lot of the authorized grapes for Châteauneuf de Pape are white grapes. It's a classic technique, and actually science has unraveled that you would think, well, if you mix a white grape into a red grape, it makes it less color, right? It's like you're diluting it. And it turns out that if you co-ferment, that's actually not the case, that it's actually the opposite. And it's a little bit counterintuitive to think about it, but you have to understand that red wine color, if you just crush up a berry of grapes, you get this purple pigment on your hands. Those are the anthocyanins, the base color molecules of grapes that are those beautiful big purple violet kind of
word,
anthocyanins. It's what makes your hands purple if you crush grapes together. The thing about anthocyanins is that they're extremely fragile, and so within a few months of a wine after it's been fermented, those anthocyanins get broken down. They go away and they don't come back unless you have fermented the grapes in such a way as to fix those anthocyanins into different forms that are still colorful but are much more stable long term. And a lot of what we do with red wine fermentation, especially when we're mixing the cap together with the juice, with our pump overs or punch downs, that cap management is not just to mix the skins with the juice to get extraction, but also to incorporate oxygen. And oxygen is an incredibly important part. It's the kind of catalyst for binding those anthocyanins, not with each other, but with other elements that sit in the wine that are actually colorless until they bind to the anthocyanins. And it turns out that white grapes are, despite being completely devoid of anthocyanins, their white grapes are not purple, that's why they're white grapes, they have an excess of the other things that when mixed
other
into
phenolic compounds.
of the other compounds that go into a wine must, that when it binds with an anthocyanin, it makes that color stable for a long period of time. And so it turns out that if you mix a small portion of this white grape with a red grape that's got lots of anthocyanins.
So if you want a wine to be more red, you should have less red grapes in it?
Not quite, but it's but that careful kind of balance of the mixture actually can enhance color. It's, I'll fully admit we blend Riesling into the heritage very often just because it's kind of just to kind of thumb our nose at wine culture. But
we would never do that.
We would never do that.
Have we had any questions?
We have.
What's going on here?
I've never heard of the Charbonneau grape. Can you
Oh my
describe
God!
Who hasn't heard of the Charbonneau
No, Molly
grape?
sent this question in. Do we have to listen to you go off on Charbonneau?
I love Charbonneau.
It should be his middle name.
And actually, the story of Charbonneau. There's the story of how it got to California.
It's now almost extinct where it was born, right?
But we first,
just like
if you remember how we discovered Charbonneau, this was by drinking a old bottle of Inglenook Charbonneau. You had come across an old bottle of
last bottle.
Damn near your last bottle.
Yeah.
You'd come across a couple of older Inglenook Cabernet Sauvignons that we were very excited to drink.
Yeah.
And included in this mixed case was a couple bottles of Inglenook Charbonneau, and this was back
1964.
1964.
I was just a lad.
And we had no idea what the grape was. We'd never heard of it before. We had no idea what it was, and we figured, we were really excited to open the Cabernet, but we figured we'd pop the Charbonneau. How bad could it be? Don't really know much about it. And Dad, it's one of those wines that kind of changed. It's an aha moment for me. The wine was gorgeous. It was it's what reminds you of old grape Burgundy. It was very intense, very perfumed, very aromatic, but totally weightless at the same time. It was ethereal in a way, and it was kind of. I think the next year is when we planted Charbonneau at Rossi.
Well, yeah, and you started your Charbonneau odyssey,
Yeah,
right? To find its original source back in up in the Alps somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Charbonneau is originally from the Savoie
Savoie,
area
yeah.
of France, or France and Italy that kind of fought over it for a few hundred years, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess France eventually won for the most part. But it's from the Savoie area, so an alpine area of France. It is nearly extinct in France.
There's like one producer that still has.
I've only been able to find one producer of what they call douce noir, sweet black, and that's that and Corbeau, which means raven, is the French name for the grape. I don't actually know how it got the word Charbonneau in California. How it got here is also up for debate, although Charbonneau is a very big cluster with big berries. And back in the 1870s, when viticulturists and nurserymen from California were making trips back to France to figure out, okay, what varieties can we import to California and, critically, sell? What can I sell to Joe Schmo grape grower in California? And you could sell grapes with big berries and that fermented, that ripened really easily with big production, and that's why Zinfandel got here. That's why Carignan got here.
As we got our first crop, we were so excited those grapes, and it really impressed me that its heritage was from that kind of Po Valley, that because it had almost a Piedmontese sort of character to it with its tannin structure, and so it's been a fascinating variety to work with. We're not sure we've got it ironed out, but this is tasting pretty good. I think we're going to taste the very first one.
We're going to taste the very first one here just a little bit.
Yeah.
But Charbonneau is a grape that's been in California and been a part of actually Napa history for a long time. There's more, I'll put it this way, there's more Charbonneau in Napa Valley right now, than there is Chenin Blanc. And that's a little bit crazy. There's only about 70 acres of Charbonneau in the entire state of California. So it's an extremely, part of what's kind of fun about the heritage is just preserving all these rare grapes, grapes that are not commonly found, whether just in California or anywhere else in the world.
It's an exciting new trend, particularly amongst your generation of winemakers to discover these older varieties and celebrate them a little bit. We're going to talk more about this, but we want to be part of that action too. It's been fun.
Well, it's kind of fun, and I think that we have.
So go through the blend on this again. It's Charbonneau,
Charbonneau, Petit Syrah, Mondouse,
right.
Mourvèdre,
Right.
Carignan, and Valdiguet. And so Valdiguet we've always known as Napa Gamay, which I think we actually have a photo of the Napa Gamay that we can show you guys. And that was part of the kind of one of the fun things that we started with at Rossi that we didn't really necessarily know what we had. We were making rosé out of it for a little bit, for a while. But it's these old vines planted in 1947 that now form a part of the heritage blend. And that was, it's a variety that's been a part of Napa. Obviously it's called Napa Gamay, but has now made its way into the heritage. And kind of it's kind of fun because nowadays you will see varietal Valdiguets coming from different parts of California.
But where you won't see them is in France. And so the places many of these varieties, Petit Syrah is called Durif in France, and it was originated from a very specific area in the south of France. It's now gone. It's extinct in the area that it was born.
Nearly extinct, yeah. And it's that's I think a common theme. Mondouse is slightly more planted actually in the same area that Charbonneau comes from. Mourvèdre is actually known historically in California as Mataro, and it's obviously still quite famous in France, but is still trying to kind of scratch out an existence in California. Places like Cobbles Creek have been making it for a long time, and there are old Mataro plantings in other areas of California, like San Benito and Contra Costa, that are still making wonderful wines. And I think it's important to just realize that that's what California wine has been doing for a long time. Is it actually reflects the geology, to kind of swing back on this a little bit, where it's this agglomeration. California was formed by things crashing into the North American plate, and it's all these kind of crazy soils that are.
So do you ever see a time when there's more Charbonneau than Cabernet Sauvignon in the Napa Valley?
But that's okay.
That's okay. Any other cool questions? That was a good one. That got us off on the going here. Yeah.
What are our main challenges in growing Chenin Blanc water, insects, fungi? Chenin Blanc often has quite large clusters that tend to botrytize very easily. And what we mean by that is they tend to
noble rot.
They tend to get the noble rot very easily.
Not so noble when you're trying to make
when you're making a dry Chenin, it can be a little challenging. But actually, Chenin is incredibly is forgiving to grow, and so we don't have any unusual issues with it. But it is, you have to make sure, and this is true with any kind of white grape in Napa, is making sure you get the acid balance right.
Yeah, but it's the first grape out too, so frost is an issue, and it's also our first grapes to ripen, and so that's a little bit of an issue too, right?
Yeah.
So we're not quite ready for them when they come on. Yeah. We have some older wine we can drink here.
We got some older wine.
Yeah. I'm very excited to try this. I have not had this wine in forever, and it looks like someone beat us to it here. But
who the heck? Somebody stole our wine here. So it's the first ever heritage blend, 2011. Just kind of fun to try. This was bottled as a wine club only wine the first year we did it. So put it out there.
We don't say wine club. Fellowship.
Fellowship of Frogs, sorry.
Fellow wine. Yeah.
But 2011, so this would have been the very first year that we harvested Charbonneau grapes.
Not the easiest of vintages either.
Not the easiest of vintages, but let's see how it turned out.
Oh my gosh, right.
We're just brilliant winemakers, I tell you.
I wish I had my 100-point card.
Oh my God, this goes way beyond that, yeah.
This would be 100.
If any of you are playing at home with your 100-point cards, just put them in the air. Put them in the air. Give us a rating here.
I think this might be the first 101-point rating.
I think that may be true. Then we're here for history again.
Yeah,
the first 101-point wine.
No one can claim that.
Nobody's ever gotten a higher score.
Get a pen, quick, put it up there.
But this, for those of you that have it in front of you, this is really starting to reflect the incredible complexity that was the whole point of the wine from the very beginning, which is that this wine is stronger as a result of its being this blend and having all these grapes kind of interacting with one
I
another.
haven't followed these wines, and I have to say, look what's happening here. It's almost like what we were tasting with the Zinfandels last week, where they have lost that baby fat, they've lost that kind of the real fruit forward sort of thing, and now it's just settling into this. Of course, 11 was a pretty hard finish too, and also that young Charbonneau was a pretty nasty sort of thing. What gave me the idea that it was Nebbiolo. It was tannic.
It was very tannic. It was Charbonneau's not a. It's not a very friendly grape. It's, you know, the question that was asked about Chenin Blanc Charbonneau was actually one of those grapes that is. I can. If I'm being honest, I can see why people don't plant it extremely widely these days, and not because it doesn't make a delicious wine. It definitely does. It's that it is difficult to grow. It is incredibly late ripening. Charbonneau is a variety that I don't know how it ever ripened in the Alps, or how, and maybe that's why they don't plant it there anymore. Is because it tends to race through most of the year. It comes out fairly early. It's actually one of the first varieties to bud out. When it goes through veraison, which is when red grapes change from green grapes to having all the color in the grapes, it races through veraison. It's one of the first red varieties to get fully colored. And then it kind of just sits there and it just says, I don't really want to do anything.
What's the hurry?
That's the hurry here. And it tends to just sort of sit there without getting sugar and without getting more, it gets progressively riper, its flavors develop, but the sugar does not increase. Now, to us, that sounds great, because that's one of the primary battles we have in Napa Valley is all the heat causing sugars to run up, and then you have high alcohols, and you're dealing with all problems with that.
So,
but to finish that thought, you know, for a grower back in the day,
finish that thought so I can so I can get onto a
for a long time historically in California, the price that you got for your grapes was determined on you hitting a specific minimum threshold of sugar, and from experience, Charbonneau only occasionally reaches that level. Yeah. And so if you're a grower who's got the option between Zinfandel, which is infamous for getting way high sugar, and it's very easy to get high sugar.
I don't know about that, but that's probably true, yeah.
Then you're going, well, that one looks pretty easy to grow. Yeah. Versus Charbonneau, which is actually, Charbonneau is interesting because it's almost immune to rot. It's an incredibly hardy, robust grape. It's almost impervious to mildew and to botrytis. Unlike Zinfandel, which is actually fairly sensitive to those things, but Charbonneau doesn't ripen, so you would never get full price for your grapes. Well, if you're a grower in California, you're not getting full price for your grapes. Charbonneau doesn't last very long.
So look, if I can bring the whole climate change question to bear here, I think we feel, and I hope you agree with me, that there's some value in keeping these heritage varietals around and experimenting with them, keeping the budwood, keeping them clean, keeping them going, learning about how they grow, their techniques, what soils they prefer. Just as almost a hedge against climate change, because these might be varieties that are more adapted to a change in the climate here, be it warmer, cooler, we don't know, right? But these might be varieties that have a greater role in Napa Valley in succeeding generations, just based on the fact that the climate may change. Is that true? Would you agree with me?
I would. I mean, we know that it's changing, and so what's lacking is a kind of knowledge, or nobody's really certain about exactly how that's going to play out. The question is often asked, what's going to happen to Napa Valley Cabernet with climate change, which, well, we may have bigger problems than that, but the basic answer is we don't know. And so it is important for us, and it's exciting to make the Chenin Blanc, it's exciting to make the heritage, but what they do for us right now is they tell us more about what it means to grow grapes in California, grow grapes in Napa Valley. I know more about Rutherford because we grow Mourvedre in Rutherford, because we go Chenin Blanc in Rutherford.
You know more about our Cabernet Sauvignon and its tendencies because you get to experiment with other varieties and see how they react.
If you can make a Riesling in Rutherford that people will actually drink, then
and enjoy, and go, oh, this is the best leapfrog milk I've ever had.
This is the best Riesling in Rutherford, which is not a very hard mountain to climb. But it tells you more about what it means to grow grapes in that area, and I think that's incredibly important because that's important for starting to be able to understand what's going to come, how do we react to any kind of changes. And so it is a bit of a hedge against climate change in that respect. It also helps us in the meantime make better wine, period. Because I know that with many people sheltered at home, and we've been sent a lot of really, really cool photos from all of you about with
keep those coming, by the way.
They really make us happy that you guys are having our wines on the table. That you sent us photos where everybody's sitting around for dinner. And everybody's at their place, and at one of those place settings is a laptop with our ugly mugs up there, sharing and importantly sharing a table with you, sharing a meal with you, sharing a little bit of part of what this is all about. And we're honestly honored and touched that you guys decide to drink wine with us, whether it's day drinking or evening drinking, whatever's your pleasure, that you're bringing us into your home and allowing us to share some time with you and share these stories with you.
Here.
You're starting to shed a tear. It's coming. I haven't reached my climax yet. But it's part of the whole goal for us is whenever you come to visit us here at Frog Sleep, and we hope that whenever you have a bottle of Frog Sleep, that we get to share a little bit of home with you. We get to share a little bit about what home means.
Would you share just a little bit more of home with me then?
Sure. Which one do you really like? There we go. It's incredibly. It defines why we like making wine. Why we are still in this business. Why we're still sticking around Napa with all the Tuscan villas everywhere.
I'll stop it.
It's incredibly integral to just what we do here at Frog Sleep, and so we hope to convey a little bit of what Rutherford tastes like, a little bit of what home tastes like to us, and have that shared with you. And it's too bad that we're not able to get you in here to the winery right now to sit on the porch and enjoy the warmer late spring weather. But we hope that some of that's reflected in the heritage and in the Chenin Blanc, and just being able to share some of that with you.
We've said it on almost every one of these so far, is that wine is stories, and you collect these stories of your experiences of drinking and enjoying wine, who you had them with, what you ate, where you were. And I'd like to think that these become part of our stories too. This is we're going through some difficult times, to say the least, and certainly as a business, certainly as a nation, certainly as a world. And so let's keep these good memories and these warm ideas about surrounding wine and make them part of our story of enjoying great wine.
Yeah, there's a cool note in here from somebody, a comment about the heritage that it often has this kind of lavender note. And I think that kind of plays into the floral element of the heritage of a lot of our wines. And I think that's you're spot on with that. I think it's the heritage especially has always had this kind of beautiful florality and kind of that dries out.
Is that a word?
It is now, yeah. I believe it.
You went to I sent you to college and you made up that to the
Well, I didn't go to class.
Florida. What did you say?
No, Florida. I already said it.
Florida.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, this wine has made you speechless, I think.
I think that it's.
Tell us what you think, you guys. Let us know. Yeah.
It's been interesting. I think following some of these 2011s over the year, especially 2011. For those of you who don't know, was a cold, rainy year. It was honestly an interesting year to start off on a completely new wine project and trying to figure out, hey, how good is this Charbonneau grape, and then being thrown a total curveball by nature and figuring out where it was going. But 2011, it's interesting. It was. I think this wine, when we first bottled it, was pretty tight. It was not very expressive, not very friendly. And this one it's got some richness now.
I think many of you have been following our wines for many years, and I'm sure some of you have other of our 11s in your cellar, Cabernet Sauvignon, the Merlot, the Zinfandels, and we are following those wines with a lot of interest ourselves. So don't drink those up in their entirety. I think we'll feature some of the 11s on the broadcast because they really do speak to a vintage in a very unique and wonderful way.
And speak to, I think that is something about the resilience of grapes, even in interesting years where we don't, and maybe this is self-serving, we never have a bad year in Napa, you know? It's just good eventually. We get some cool questions in here. What made us decide to use concrete for the fermentation and aging of the Chenin Blanc? You know, part of what we were discovering with the Chenin Blanc is that, or with the concrete rather, is that it was enhancing texture and really kind of driving.
You're going to give a bullshit answer. Do you want to know the real answer?
That's not a BS answer.
Okay.
It was that, you know, that it.
I'll tell you why it's bullshit in a second.
Concrete had always kind of had this way of emphasizing texture and really drawing out differences in texture. And for me, my understanding of Chenin Blanc going into this was that it was a texture-driven white and a texture-driven grape, and so concrete seemed like a natural vessel for it. We have small stainless steel tanks. We've experimented with those as well, and
we have two, and they were both used up, so we had to ferment this wine in concrete.
We could have moved the wine out, you know that. What flavors do we find in the Chenin Blanc? Again, for me, that's kind of, right now it's expressing that kind of beeswax and peach kind of character.
Yeah, this is what it does, right?
Yeah, really, really nice. How often do people open the bottle from the wrong end? Tragically often, actually. It's why we include the warning on the label.
Did I ever tell you that story? Why we put open other end on our warning label?
No.
Well, I was very annoyed back in the late 80s when they came out with the sulfite warnings that we had to label that there was sulfur in wine and that it could cause health issues, which anyone who
is not true.
It's not true. But so this was required, which was not a problem, and I didn't care, put it on the label, but we didn't have a machine that could put a back label on, so there was no place to put this, so we had to re-up and do. So I in the process, I became rather annoyed with this, and so I started to think about other ways people can get hurt drinking wine, and it came to me that opening the wrong end of the bottle was one of the first things that came to me as potentially dangerous. So we actually put open other end on our warning label along with the sulfite warning, and we have to send this in for approval. Everything we put on the label has to be approved by at that point it was called the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and they sent it back and said not approved, and which got my dander up a little bit, and so we went back and we said, why are not you approving this? And they said, we think you're making fun of the warning label for sulfites. And
No, we would never do that with government.
Well, anyway, so we ultimately had to suggest legal action if they didn't allow us to put this warning label on, that if anyone got hurt opening the wrong end of the bottle, they would be responsible, and so we got it approved. So it's my little stick it in the eye, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How do we decide on the percentage between the varietals? In the heritage blend, it's actually completely determined by whatever the field gives us that year. So it's dependent on the size of the block, and sometimes the Charbonneau has a great year, sometimes the Petit Syrah has a great year. A little bit. We would like to say that we knew that 33% Charbonneau was the right percentage.
Perfect.
And that's kind of just what's unique about the wine every year, is that it changes.
Hey, before we get too far along though, I want to mention that we've got a very, very exciting session coming up next week, so we hope you guys will come back and join us. There's been a lot of interest in the way we farm organically, the way we farm without irrigation, the biodiversity. Many of you know we grow about 40 other crops besides grapes here at the winery, how those all fit in. So we're actually going to be out in the field next week and talking about our decision to farm organically now 30 years ago. Rory's going to demonstrate a little bit about why we farm without irrigation. And so this is going to be a very, very exciting. And
I don't think we're going to cover it all in one go.
I don't think so either, but I'm very excited for it, and I think that any of you who are interested in grape growing or organics or anything like that, tune into this. I think it's going to be a really fun sessions. We got a couple wines right here from Red Barn to try next week that are demonstrate the principles of organic dry farming.
Yeah, and give us something to drink while we're give us a break from talking every now and then. It'll be really exciting to kind of share some of that. It's a chance for us to go on a little bit of a deep dive with you guys on.
It might be a little
deeper than deep. We've been organic for a long time. We've been dry farming for a long time. We don't often get a chance to fully explain it to everybody and via video, and so we hope you're all prepared and tune in to.
If you want to do a little homework on this, by the way, there's a film that's out there right now called, I think it's The Biggest Little Farm or Big Little Farm or something like that, and it's about a story about a farm that was developed down in closer to LA, but it was developed by one of my gurus in organics, Alan York. It's a great, wonderful story with a little bit of a tragic end, but if you have a chance to, I think it's on Netflix, have a chance to look that up. Jessica, what is it called? The Biggest Little Farm?
Biggest Little Farm.
Biggest Little Farm. Check it out. I think have you even seen it?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, please check it out. And that's part of your homework for next week, you guys.
Yeah. I think it would be very cool. I think Instagram Live is probably going to end in 10 seconds. Well, hopefully we'll tune back into that and we'll answer some more questions. But thank you guys for Instagram on joining us. Please read up once that feed kicks back on.
We've wasted almost a perfectly good hour again.
Yeah, of your time. How much wine from other winemakers do you drink versus your own, and does it help with our winemaking? We drink a lot of wine from other people.
It's a little embarrassing.
We might be able to. We actually, I just had I have a regular meeting tasting group with other family members and also other friends here in the Valley. The question was about what wine do we drink from other people. We just had a virtual Zoom tasting group dinner last night, where because we couldn't all meet and share the exact same bottles. A bunch of us went around and actually bought bottles from producers that we love in the area and wanted to share with folks. And so we tasted some really cool stuff. And this was a chance for us to drink multiple wines in the same night, which we're never totally averse to. But we had the Mountain Tides Petite Syrah, we had the Di Costanzo Cabernet, and the Newfound Wines Carignan. So small producers, all here in Napa Valley, all people who live in Napa. Only one of the wines was from Napa, but those are the wines we drink. And I think it helps make us better winemakers, because all of these wines are challenging, they're interesting in different ways. And so it's.
I used to drink other people's wine.
Now you just drink your own wine. You already know so much about wine. You're just the master. Yeah.
Why lower my standards?
Yeah. When we were having the audio issues earlier around the Chenin Blanc, I think maybe it's worth repeating how we came to Chenin Blanc in the first place, which was there was this little corner of our Gallery vineyard, which is our main source of our Sauvignon Blanc here at Frog's Leap, that it has a different soil type. And so Napa Valley is made up of hundreds of different soil types, and at this little kind of pocket end of one of the blocks at Gallery, there is a clay silt soil that we know was it'd be fine for Sauvignon Blanc. We figured we could do that. So okay, we got that in our back pocket.
A little shout out to Jonah Beer on this, by the way.
Yeah, who is supportive at least.
Well, I gave him a list of 5 varieties. I said, look, I want to try a new variety, and here's 5. And oh my God, why are you doing this? But I think Jonah, I'm going to tack the Chenin Blanc onto you a little bit here too.
He absolves himself of responsibility.
Yeah, he's dying right now.
Yeah. But the Chenin Blanc for us was a chance to explore a variety that we knew was important to the history of Napa Valley, and a wine that we had drunk, I had drunk growing up just at dinner every day with a bunch of different types of food, and always loved the grape, but never really never made it, never been able to farm it. And so it was kind of just us having a little bit of wild hair one day and saying, hey, let's do something.
This is great with wild hair, by the way.
Yeah, if any of you are having wild hair for Easter, that's a little bit sick and sadistic on Easter.
Eating
the Easter bunny, but Chenin Blanc is a great pairing with it. Let's see. never heard of Charbonneau, Valdiguet, and Mondouse, what other typical wine varieties are these blended with? They're typically not blended in their home countries because they're very rarely made in their home countries.
Well, you should mention that Bernardo is also is it a clone of Charbonneau, or
No, it's
that's
so
going down a rabbit hole.
it is a rabbit hole. So Charbonneau, if you've ever had a Bernarda from Argentina, you've actually had Charbonneau before. It's actually the widest, the most planted red variety in the country of Argentina. We mostly know about Malbec from Argentina, but Bernarda's actually still the majority of the acreage down there, and that is Charbonneau. And nobody has any idea about how it got to Argentina, why it is the most widely planted variety there, even though it's extinct in France or nearly extinct. And how it came to California, nobody's totally sure. These are the paths of grapes that have made their way to the New World, and honestly, it's almost like because there's no old world comparison for it. There's no Grand Vin de Charbonneau,
a little bit like Zinfandel.
In a way where we get to make our own interpretation of it. It's kind of up to us to give nobility to the grape, to find interesting ways of expressing it. And I don't know, it's more of this 18 in my glass. I don't know if you've seen it as well, but it's it's exciting to see how these grapes have developed and what we're able to do with them.
That has only become more fruit forward.
And so this Charbonneau, we've found it to be this kind of savory, fruity. It's this really kind of deeply colored grape that really plays well in these blends. Obviously not a traditional blending with Valdiguet and Mourvèdre and Petit Syrah. This is the heritage has no, I guess put it this way, the heritage has no old world correlate. This is a uniquely...
I say that, but Rory, I have such an incredible memory of going over to visit Burgundy and meeting a few of our barrel producers over there, and one of them took me to lunch at this, I don't know what the equivalent of that, but it was just a place where all the vineyard workers came for lunch, and there was one big stew, I think it had rabbit in it, and they served pitchers of red wine that was just frothy red wine, and I just said, I have arrived. I now am at the heart and soul of what wine is. And I also have a very distinct memory when we were at the Frog Farm with Larry, and we were rebuilding the Frog Farm back in the mid-70s. We would drink just liters of Fetzer Premium Red, which were probably made from a lot of the same varieties, and just that fruitiness and that wonderment, the relaxed nature of the wine was such a joy. And I think we have to be careful about getting so hung up. Yes, we have the noble varieties, and yes, they are so wonderful, but sometimes you just want a good glass of wine. Here you go.
And the heritage does that, for sure. Cheers. Well, guys, I think it's time for us to start getting some more heritage.
I think I'm going to take the rest of this bottle home.
No, I'm taking it home. Get our arm wrestle.
Hey, we'll see you guys next week. We're going to talk about organic farming. We're going to talk about dry farming. We're going to talk about elements that you maybe can get into a little bit of biodynamics and biodiversity in farming situations. It's going to be a really intense and wonderful day. And we hope you'll join us again next week.
If you guys have ever been interested to know sort of the origins of organic with Frog Sleep, and we've been doing it for so long, and I'll give props to my dad. He's an OG with organics. If you want to hear it,
old OG,
original gangster, actually. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I've seen it a little bit recently, and I didn't know what it meant.
I wouldn't have expected you to know what
What's LOL?
Yeah, let's not go down there. Look, that's been a whole can of worms for you. We just need to touch on it.
Okay.
We'll teach you about internet culture some other day.
I hope
How
so.
about that? But it's if you ever want a chance to hear it kind of from the source about why start with this crazy idea, how it's become a little bit more mainstream over the years, and is now almost assumed in any kind of fine wine context that,
Yeah.
oh, well, of course they're growing organically.
The
It's
paradigm's
definitely
changed.
not always the case. Definitely was not the case back when we started. And but there's some interesting histories beyond, behind why it came to be, and we hope it'll inform you about why we do it, why we farm organically, and hope to spread that knowledge with you guys.
So we'll see you next week. In the meantime, you guys be safe, take care of yourselves, enjoy some good wine, take care of your families, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers.